Buenos días a todos y a todas, excelencias, distinguidos y distinguidas colegas.
Distinguished colleagues, good morning. I declare open the 9th meeting of the 56th session of the UPR Working Group. We will now proceed with a review of Somalia. Before beginning, I'd like to recall you that all delegations should present their oral declarations to the online systems to inscribe themselves on the list of speakers before the beginning of the review. In line with Resolution 5/1 of the Human Rights Council, this council will be based on a national report prepared by the state under review, in this case Somalia, and the compilation of information of the UN and summary of information provided by interested stakeholders, both documents prepared by OHCHR. I have the honor now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Ajila Salumi, Mr. Minister of Development and Human Rights, to present the national report. You have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It's an honor to present Somalia Fourth Cycle Universal Periodic Review, the report of behalf of Federal Government of Somalia. This report was prepared through our national mechanism for reporting and follow-up, led by the Ministry of Family and Human Rights Development. We gathered input from the federal ministries, parliament, federal member states, civil society, women's groups, and organizations of persons with disabilities. Since the last review, Somalia has made a real progress, include reporting on all binding treaty body report and engaging with the special procedures thematic mandate holders. Work on ratifying the Convention of the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women and the Maputo Protocol continue between 2024 and 2025 and remains a priority for 2026. In October 2025, the House of the People adopted the Trafficking Bill for the African Charter of the Rights and Welfare of the Child, which was signed into the law by the President and with the boosted African Union. On legal reform, in March 2024, we signed into the law amendment to the first 4 chapters of the Provisional Federal Constitutions, reforming the Bill of Rights. The Cabinet approved a Penal Code Amendment Bill and submitted a Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Bill. Parliament passed the Disability Law, the National Election Law, and Auditor General Law, and the National Electoral Commission Law, among other reforms. In 2025, Somalia established it is the first ever National Independent Human Rights Commission under the law number 16 of 2016. 9 commissioners were appointed by the presidential decree in December 2025. This is a historic step for our country. On women participation in November 2024, Somalia adopted election law that sets a minimum 30% quota for women across all levels of the government. Women parliamentary group have been strengthened and work continue to develop our second generation NAP on women, peace and security. 3 of threat from the terrorists remains. Our response combines military and law enforcement with the provision, and we are working to strengthen human rights safeguard in this response. Somalia does not claim to have resolved all these challenges, but direction is clear. We welcome this dialogue, and we look forward to your recommendation. We also ask for continued international support, including meaningful support to the realization of the new signed host country agreement between the Office of the High Commissioner and the Federal Republic of Somalia to make a Human Rights Commission full operation and continue building the capacity of our national institutions. Thank you.
I would like to thank Her Excellency for this statement. We shall now begin with our interactive dialogue. Before giving the floor to delegations for their questions and comments, I would like to remind you that the speaking time will be 1 minute and 10 seconds for all. I wish to reiterate that issues of a political, bilateral, and territorial nature should be kept out of our deliberations. Moreover, United Nations terminology should be used when referring to states and territories. Please be reminded that only the use of the words recommended or recommendation will ensure that the relevant parts of your statements are included in the recommendations section of the working group report. Also, allow me to recall that the Human Rights Council strongly rejects any act of intimidation or reprisal against individuals and groups who cooperate or have cooperated with the United Nations and its representatives and mechanisms in the field of human rights. We'll now begin with a list of speakers. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Ethiopia warmly welcomes the high-level delegation of Somalia and thanks it for the presentation of its national report. We commend Somalia for its continued effort to strengthen state institutions and advance human rights. We particularly note progress in the areas of governance reforms, constitutional development, and efforts to expand access to basic social services. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Ethiopia offers the following recommendations. 1. Continue strengthening efforts to enhance access to quality education and healthcare services. 2. Continue intensifying measures to promote poverty reduction and sustainable livelihoods, especially in rural areas. 3. Continue efforts to promote peace, security, and durable sustainability as a foundation for sustainable development. In closing, Ethiopia wishes Somalia every success in this review process. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Estonia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Estonia welcomes the delegation of Somalia to its fourth UPR. We commend Somalia's ongoing work to improve the human rights situation, including legislation protecting persons with disabilities, strengthening workers' rights, and reinforcing institutions despite a challenging security environment. We particularly welcome the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission and Somalia's engagement with international human rights mechanisms. Estonia recommends to Somalia to 1. Amend the media law from 2021 and remove and clarify provisions that could be used to curtail the rights to freedom of expression and media freedom in Somalia. 2. Enact laws that criminalize all forms of female genital mutilation. And 3. Ratify the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the Involvement of Children in Armed Conflict. We wish Somalia a successful review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of France. The representative is not here. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Gabon. Thank you very much, President. Gabon would like to extend a warm welcome to the delegation of Somalia and thank the delegation for presentation of the report. We praise the full cooperation of Somalia with mechanisms of the Council and UN bodies working on human rights. In this respect, we congratulate Somalia on the strengthening its cooperation with treaty bodies through the submission of initial reports under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention Against Torture, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We take note with satisfaction the creation of a National Independent Human Rights Commission, and we encourage the country to continue this work and recommend Somalia the following. First, continue its fight against the sexual exploitation of children, and two, fully implement the national law to combat FGM. Finally, delegation of Gabon would like to wish Somalia full success during this review. Thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Gambia. Well, it seems that the delegation is not in the room. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Georgia warmly welcomes and thanks the delegation of Somalia for the presentation of the national report. My delegation is encouraged by ongoing preparatory actions related to the ratification of outstanding international legal instruments, and we are hopeful that it will be completed in a reasonable timeframe. My delegation positively assesses the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission and urges Somalia to take further steps towards its full operability. With this in mind, Georgia recommends to the government of Somalia, first, to continue efforts to guarantee access to education for all children, and second, to strengthen efforts to promote the rights of persons with disabilities. We wish the delegation of Somalia successful review. I thank you.
Gracias, señora Palabra.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany.
Thank you, Vice President. Germany welcomes the delegation of Somalia and notes with appreciation that several of our previous UPR recommendations have been supported while noting ongoing challenges in their implementation. Germany commends Somalia's government for the establishment of the National Human Rights Commission last year. We remain concerned about issues across different areas, including persistent violence against women and girls, as well as journalists and human rights defenders. Germany therefore recommends to 1. Swiftly ratify CEDAW and harmonize national laws respectively. 2. Ratify the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the Involvement of Children in Armed Conflict. 3. Undertake awareness-raising campaigns on the negative consequences of child marriage. 4. Swiftly implement a moratorium on the use of the death penalty and ratify the second optional protocol to the ICCPR. And 5. Take measures to better protect journalists and media workers to safeguard freedom of expression and an independent press. We wish Somalia a very successful review. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ghana.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Ghana warmly welcomes the delegation of Somalia to the fourth cycle of the UPR and thanks them for their presentation. We commend Somalia for steps taken to address emerging human rights issues, including the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission in December 2025. We recognize Somalia's establishment of a national policy framework to advance the progressive realization of the rights to safe drinking water and sanitation through the water, sanitation, and hygiene sector policy and the water resources strategy. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Ghana recommends to Somalia to 1, ratify the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, 2, ratify the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture, and 3, adopt a national poverty reduction strategy with strengthened transparency and accountability in the management of humanitarian assistance. Ghana wishes Somalia success in this UPR process. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Haiti. Delegation is not in the room. I now give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Honduras. Honduras does not seem to be in the room. I give the floor to distinguished ambassador of Iceland.
Tampoco se encuentran.
It seems that they're also not in the room. I give the floor to distinguished delegation of India.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. India welcomes the delegation of Somalia and thanks the delegation for its presentation. We appreciate legislative measures undertaken by Somalia towards protecting human rights during the reporting period. We particularly note and laud the efforts of establishing counter-terrorism framework, which goes a long way in protecting the victims of terrorism. Besides 30% quota for women in political and public life and establishment of National Disability Agency are laudable steps. In the spirit of constructive cooperation, India makes the following recommendations to Somalia. 1. Continue its efforts in establishment of a constitutional court. 2. Speed up its effort to ratify key human rights treaties. 3. Consider taking further steps to realize economic and social rights of its citizens. We wish the delegation of Somalia all the success in its review. I thank you.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished delegation of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Indonesia welcomes the engagements of Somalia to the UPR and appreciates its effort to advance human rights, including through the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission. We particularly commend Somalia's effort to strengthen its institutions and improve security while ensuring respect for international law with continued support from international and regional partners. In this spirit, we offer Somalia the following recommendations. 1. Continue strengthening the National Independent Human Rights Commission to effectively promote and protect human rights throughout the country. 2. Further strengthen the capacity of national security forces to ensure full compliance with international human rights and humanitarian law, particularly in operation to counter violent extremisms and terrorisms. 3. Consider ratifying the CEDAW and CMW to further strengthen the national human rights framework. Finally, we wish Somalia success for its review. I thank you.
Gracias, tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Islamic Republic of Iran welcomes the delegation of Somalia and takes note of its progress in establishing National Independent Human Rights Commission in December 2025, expanding the Baksano Social Safety Net program to 500,000 households, launching the National Plan of Action for Children, enacting law number 29 of 2024 on the rights of persons with disabilities, and advancing National Solution Pathway Action Plan for the internally displaced persons. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, we offer the following recommendations. 1. Accelerate the implementation of National Solution Pathway Plan to support the durable solution for 1 million IDPs in Banadir Bay and Puntland. 2. Strengthen wash policy through borehole rehabilitation and multi-use water systems under Barwago project to reduce sanitation gaps in rural-prone areas. 3. Intensify teacher recruitment under education sector strategic plan to meet the target of recruiting an additional 4,000 teachers. We wish Somalia a successful review. I thank you.
Gracias, tiene la
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished delegation of Iraq.
شكرا السيد الرئيس. يرحب وفد العراق برئاسة.
Thank you very much, President. And delegation of my country, I would like to extend a warm welcome to delegation of Somalia, a sister country to this fourth UPR cycle. We praise the efforts taken by the country to prepare the report. In a constructive spirit, we recommend the following. First, step up efforts with a view of improving the levels of school enrollment, strengthening relevant infrastructure, especially in rural areas. 2, combat discrimination against children with disabilities, migrant children, and all of those children that do not have families, and also children from minority tribes. In conclusion, we would like to wish Somalia full success. Thank you.
Gracias, tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Ireland.
Mr. President, Ireland thanks the delegation of Somalia for its presentation today. Ireland welcomes Somalia's efforts to advance human rights domestically. We note the progress made on key women's rights and gender-based violence legislation, such as the national anti-FGM bill. However, Ireland remains concerned that civilians are still subjected to serious human rights violations and abuses. Women and girls continue to experience conflict-related sexual violence and other forms of gender-based violence within a culture of impunity and stigmatization. We also regret the continuing use of restrictive legal frameworks, intimidations, and violence by security forces against journalists, civil society organizations, and human rights defenders. Ireland recommends that Somalia, 1, ratify CEDAW and the Maputo Protocol as a matter of urgency and harmonize national laws with these instruments to strengthen protection for women and girls. 2, investigate and prosecute the killing, harassment, and torture of journalists, human rights defenders, and civil society actors, and repeal or amend restrictive legislation which may be used to restrict independent media and freedom of expression. We wish Somalia every success in this UPR cycle. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished ambassador of Italy.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We thank the distinguished delegation of Somalia. Italy acknowledges the steps taken to promote the rights of persons with disabilities, including the establishment of the National Disability Agency, and encourage to fully implement the CRPD. Italy offers Somalia the following recommendations: introduce a moratorium on capital executions and consider ratifying the second optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Adopt measures to prevent and combat all forms of recruitment and use of child soldiers, ensure their rehabilitation and reintegration, and establish an effective child justice system. Ratify CEDAW and take immediate measures to eliminate all forms of sexual and gender-based violence and discrimination against women and girls, including by criminalizing them and holding perpetrators accountable. We wish Somalia a successful review. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Japan warmly welcomes the delegation of Somalia to this session. Japan welcomes the significant legislative steps taken by Somalia to promote the rights of persons with disabilities through the new National Disability Law. In a spirit of constructive dialogue, Japan recommends that Somalia, 1. Continue ongoing efforts to implement a national legal framework to ensure that persons with disabilities have access to education, healthcare, employment opportunities, and other essential services. 2. Strengthen efforts to effectively protect the rights of the child, in particular, by preventing and eradicating the recruitment and use of child soldiers, including through ratification of the optional protocol on the involvement of children in armed conflict. And 3. Effectively safeguard freedom of expression and the independence of the media by protecting media workers from threats and harassment. We wish the delegation of Somalia every success in the review. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Jordan.
Mr. Vice President, we would like to welcome the delegation of the friendly delegation of Somalia. We fully support its sovereignty and territorial integrity. We also value the efforts made to enhance human rights. In a constructive spirit, we recommend the following. 1, to continue developing legislations and policies to protect women and children in accordance with international commitments. 2, enhance measures to expand access to education, healthcare, and basic services, especially for vulnerable groups and those affected by conflict and natural disasters. In conclusion, we wish Somal all success, and we highly value the efforts of the permanent representative of Somal in Geneva and her team. They are extremely professional in their role to enhance multilateralism. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Kenya.
Kenya warmly welcomes the Somalian delegation. We note the comprehensive national report, which reflects the significant strides made since the third cycle. In a spirit of constructive dialogue, Kenya recommends 1, to sustain the commendable efforts to expand access to education, including by improving inclusion and retention, particularly for vulnerable groups. 2, to sustain efforts to improve the health system, including by expanding access to essential health services. We wish the delegation of Somalia a most successful review session. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Gracias.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Kuwait.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We welcome the chair of the delegation of Somalia and her team. We commend the efforts made by the government as in the national report, especially the establishment of a national independent committee for human rights. In a constructive spirit, we recommend 1, to pursue efforts to enhance the sector of education, especially providing quality education to all categories of the population to pursue the enhancement of essential health services and to build on the national programs in the context of healthcare. We wish the Republic of Somalia all success. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. Now I'd like to recognize the distinguished delegation of Latvia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Latvia welcomes the delegation of Somalia to the UPR working group and thanks it for presenting the national report. We welcome the legal and institutional reforms undertaken by the government of Somalia since the third review, notably the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission. Latvia would like to make the following recommendations. 1, to take all necessary measures to combat violence against children and early and forced marriage, as well as the use of child
forensic laboratories and one-stop centers for survivors, as well as training security personnel to investigate such cases. In the spirit of constructive engagements, Lesotho makes the following recommendations. First, Somalia should expedite the establishment of an independent National Human Rights Commission and judicial bodies to strengthen the rule of law and accountability. Secondly, it should address arbitrary arrests and violence against journalists and human rights advocates to enhance the protection of fundamental freedoms, particularly freedom of expression. Lastly, through legislative reform and enforcement actions, Somalia should step up its efforts to stop harmful traditions, including child marriage and female genital mutilation. The Kingdom of Lesotho wishes Somalia a successful review. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. Recognize the distinguished delegation of Malawi.
Mr. Vice President, Malawi warmly welcomes the Federal Republic of Somalia to this review and thanks the esteemed delegation for the presentation. Malawi notes the progress made in the promotion and protection of human rights since the last review and commends Somalia for the continued efforts in the implementation of its international human rights obligations as reflected in the NIST National Development Plan, NDP 9, 2020-2024. We further commend Somalia for the enhanced cooperation with the UN and partners aimed at building human rights capacity through joint programs, institutional support, and nationwide outreach. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Malawi makes the following recommendation to Somalia. 1. Consider ratifying the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. 2. Work on adopting a comprehensive legislation prohibiting discrimination against persons with disabilities. And 3. Continue strengthening its engagement with the UN treaty bodies. We wish the Federal Republic of Somalia all the best at this review. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Malaysia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Malaysia thanks Somalia for the presentation of its national report. We commend Somalia for undertaking numerous initiatives to promote and protect human rights since the last UPR cycle. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Malaysia recommends the following. First, strengthen efforts to ensure access to quality healthcare for all, including by addressing financial, geographic, and social barriers, and improving healthcare infrastructure and workforce capacity. Second, continue to make efforts to realize the right to education for all, particularly in rural and conflict-affected areas. Third, enhance efforts to provide victims of violence, including sexual and gender-based violence, with comprehensive support services, including medical, psychosocial, and legal assistance, and ensure access to justice and effective remedies. And fourth, strengthen measures to protect children from violence, exploitation, and recruitment by armed groups, and ensure their rehabilitation and reintegration. We wish Somalia a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Maldives is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Maldives warmly welcomes the high-level delegation from Somalia to this fourth cycle review and thanks them for their presentation today. We commend Somalia for its efforts to strengthen its human rights framework, including the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission in 2025. The Maldives recognizes the many challenges faced by Somalia as a result of decades of conflict and its ongoing efforts to engage constructively with and support Somalia in advancing its national priorities. In a constructive spirit, the Maldives presents the following recommendations to Somalia. 1. Strengthen efforts to eliminate harmful practices, including child marriage and female genital mutilation, and ensure full legal protection of children. 2. Promote quality education, including by ensuring the availability of qualified teachers and the provision of safe and fully accessible infrastructure. 3. Establish and support alternative care systems for orphan children and provide such children with free education, food, clean water, and other essential services. The Maldives wishes Somalia every success in its review. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Gracias.
Thank you. Now the distinguished representative of Mali is recognized. Thank you, Vice President. Mali warmly welcomes the delegation of Somalia. My delegation commends Somalia's cooperation with treaty bodies through the presentation of several initial reports under various conventions. My delegation appreciates Somalia's adoption of various laws that have contributed to the creation of an updated legal framework adapted to governance, security, and regulatory needs. We also welcome strengthening of water infrastructure and the improvement of climate resilience through the rehabilitation of wells, hydrometeorological monitoring, and the adoption of flood protection measures. Constructively, we recommend that Somalia adopt the Juvenile Justice Bill in line with the Convention of the Rights of the Child and establish a specialized child justice system with adequate resources and composed of specialized and properly trained judges. 2. Improve the quality of education, including by ensuring that teachers are qualified and that there are women among them and schools are fully accessible. Thank you. The Ambassador of Malta is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Malta welcomes the delegation of Somalia and thanks them for the national report. For several decades, Somalia has faced a challenging human rights situation as a result of protracted conflict, insecurity, and political instability. Malta remains seriously concerned about the impact of these circumstances on the enjoyment of human rights by persons in Somalia. Despite the federal government's actions, female genital mutilation and sexual and gender-based violence remain prevalent. We would like to make the following recommendations. 1. Abolish the death penalty at all circumstances. 2. Accede to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. 3. Take immediate measures to end and prevent the recruitment of use of children by parties to conflict and hold perpetrators accountable. 4. Adopt the proposed bill banning female genital mutilation as soon as possible and ensure its effective implementation across Somalia. Malta wishes Somalia a successful review. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Mauritania is recognized.
السيد الرئيس ترحب موريتانيا.
Vice President, we would like to welcome the delegation of Mauritania and we appreciate their constructive engagement in this UPR. We welcome the progress made in strengthening the legal and institutional framework, including the establishment of the International Human Rights Commission, legislative reforms, such as the protection of children and persons with disabilities. We recommend 1. To pursue efforts with a view to the ratification of international human rights instruments that have not yet been ratified by the country, to adapt national legislation to international standards. 2. To step up efforts in order to establish the main legal and constitutional bodies, including the Constitutional Court, with a view to ensuring the rule of law and institutional accountability. Thank you. Thank you. Now we will have a video statement of Mauritius.
Thank you, Chair. Mauritius extends a warm welcome to the delegation of Somalia during this fourth cycle of the UPR. We take this opportunity to congratulate Somalia on its commitment to adhere to key human rights instruments and its engagement with the various mechanisms of the United Nations. We welcome the establishment of Somalia's National Human Rights Commission. In a constructive spirit, Mauritius recommends that Somalia continues its efforts to adhere to human rights instruments and adopts appropriate laws to prohibit marriage under the age of 18 for both boys and girls. We wish Somalia a very successful review. Thank you.
A continuación tiene la...
Thank you. And next we have the distinguished representative of Mexico. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We would like to thank Somalia for the presentation of their report, and we acknowledge the approval of the law banning discrimination on the grounds of disability and the law on juvenile justice. Constructively and respectfully, Mexico recommends 1. To ratify the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers. 2. To criminalize child marriage, female genital mutilation, and all forms of gender violence. 3. To create and maintain, both in law and in practice, an enabling and safe environment for journalists and human rights defenders. We wish Somalia a successful review cycle. Thank you. Thank you. The distinguished representative of Montenegro has the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Montenegro welcomes the delegation of Somalia and its constructive engagement with the UPR mechanism.
Montenegro shares concerns about the highly complex human rights situation and the systemic challenges facing the citizens of Somalia, including poverty, climate conditions, political instability, armed conflict, and displacement. Montenegro encourages the authorities to strengthen cooperation with the OHCHR and international partners with the aim of building resilient institutions, reinforcing the rule of law, and ensuring the protection of civilians. The level of violence faced by women and girls, the high prevalence of FGM, and the abuse of children, including in armed conflicts, remain matters of our particular concern. We took positive note on adopted timeline for accession to the optional protocol to the CRC on the involvement of children in armed conflict. Montenegro recommends the following. 1. To accelerate the accession process to both 1945 and 1961 conventions on statelessness and take all steps necessary for their implementation. 2. To introduce a moratorium on application of the death penalty. We wish Somalia a successful UPR, and I thank you.
Thank you. Now, the distinguished delegation of Morocco has the floor.
Mr. President, my delegation would like to welcome the delegation of Somalia and thanks them for presenting their national report. My delegation particularly welcomes the systematic implementation process for all adopted UPR recommendations. Morocco would like to commend the institutional milestone in 2025 with the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission. Aware of all efforts already made and in a constructive spirit, Morocco would like to make the following 2 recommendations. 1. Ratifying the Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and the Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Family. 2. Allocate adequate resources to accelerate the expansion of birth registration systems to increase demand and coverage, particularly in hard-to-reach areas. We wish the delegation of Somalia full success in this UPR. Thank you, Mr. President.
Gracias.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Namibia has the floor.
Mr. President, Namibia welcomes the delegations of Somalia and thanks it for defending its national report. We commend Somalia for recent alignment of its criminal justice system to international standard. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, we recommend the ratifications of the following instrument. Covenant on eliminations of all forms of discriminations against women, optional protocol on involvement of children in armed conflict, and covenant on civil and political rights. And Namibia wishes the delegation of Somalia a productive review. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Nepal has the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Nepal welcomes the delegation of the Federal Republic of Somalia to the 4th cycle of UPR and thanks them for the presentation of national report. We appreciate Somalia for its constructive engagement in the international human rights mechanisms and its efforts to implement the recommendations of the last UPR. Nepal commends the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission, NIHRC, in 2025 and wishes success in its full operationalization. We take good note of the progress made by Somalia towards reducing poverty and improving living standards of its people. In a constructive spirit, Nepal recommends Somalia the following. 1. Strengthen measures to ensure equality and non-discrimination in both public and private spheres. 2. Scale up efforts to ensure universal access to quality education for all, particularly for girls and rural children. 3. Strengthen measures to increase employment opportunities and creation of decent jobs. We wish Somalia all success in its review. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la.
Thank you. The representative of the Kingdom of the Netherlands has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Kingdom of the Netherlands thanks the delegation of Somalia for the presentation of its national report. The Netherlands commends the Somali government for establishing the National Independent Human Rights Commission. The Netherlands, however, notes with Somali civil society that without a credible, open, and participatory appointment process, the NIHRC may undermine the principles it was created to uphold. In the spirit of constructive cooperation, the Netherlands recommends for Somalia, first, to take concrete and sustained action to uphold freedom of expression
and guarantee the safety of journalists and media workers operating across the country. And second, to address the pervasive and deeply alarming levels of sexual violence against women and girls across Somalia. The Netherlands wishes Somalia success with a follow-up of all recommendations it receives during this UPR cycle. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of New Zealand is recognized.
Mr. Vice President, we warmly welcome the delegation from Somalia. We commend the progress made by Somalia over recent years, including on the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission, and efforts to address the rights of vulnerable groups, for example, through the introduction of the National Disability Act 2024. We remain concerned by ongoing human rights abuses. New Zealand recommends that Somalia, 1, institute a moratorium on executions and move towards the abolition of the death penalty. 2, ratify the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. 3, develop comprehensive federal gender-based violence legislation that criminalizes all forms of gender-based violence, including marital rape. 4, conduct effective and impartial investigations into allegations of threats or violence against journalists, media workers, and human rights defenders, including online. We thank the delegation for their participation today and wish them a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Nigeria is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Nigeria warmly welcomes the delegation of the Federal Republic of Somalia to its fourth UPR. Nigeria appreciates Somalia's efforts to strengthen national institutions and promote human rights despite its current challenges. In this connection, Nigeria takes positive note of key initiatives and improvements, including the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission, the National Plan of Action for Children, and the enactment of the National Disability Law. Cognizant of these laudable strides, Nigeria wishes to recommend that Somalia, 1, consider ratifying the ICRMW and the CEDAW, 2, continue to strengthen the operational capacity and independence of the National Independent Human Rights Commission in line with the Paris Principles, and 3, continue to mobilize and strengthen technical and financial support to enhance its capacity to fulfill its human rights obligations. Finally, Nigeria wishes Somalia every success in its review. I thank you, President.
Gracias.
Thank you. We will now break from the list of speakers and give the floor to the delegation to address the observations and comments that have been made so far. The delegation has the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I thank you. Allow me to provide a brief technical overview of the Somalia's fourth cycle national report and the implementation architecture that underpins it. The report was prepared through the National Mechanism for Reporting and Follow-up, under which the Ministry of Family and Human Rights served as the lead institution and national focal point. In that role, the Ministry chaired the Interministerial Human Rights Task Force and coordinated submission from federal ministries, agencies, national independent commissions, the judiciary, parliament, federal member states, and other designated members. The process also included stakeholder consultation with civil society organizations, women's rights groups, organizations of persons with disabilities, professional associations, and academia. From a technical perspective, Somalia's report reflects 3 core messages. The first is that Somalia strengthened the national framework for implementation and follow-up. Cabinet approved the NMRF policy in 2024, established a more structured and interministerial mechanism for human rights reporting and follow-up, chaired by the Ministry of Family and Human Rights. This is important because the UBR is no longer being approached as an isolated reporting exercise, but as a part of a wider national system that links UBR follow-up, treaty body engagements, special procedures, and SDGs implementation. The second is that the reporting period has been a concrete institutional and legislative movement. Somalia's advanced treaty engagement, constitutional reform, criminal law reform, disability legislation, electoral legislation, and the establishment of the National Disability Agency and the National Independent Human Rights Commission. These are the concrete institutional changes that now require a continued implementation, support, and monitoring. The third is that Somalia has sought to connect a legal reform to practical delivery and inclusion. This can be seen in the implementation of the National Plan for Children, the expansion of social protection through ongoing national programs, the growth of health and education system, disability inclusion measures, women's participation mechanisms, and efforts to strengthen access to justice and support for victims. At the same time, Somalia acknowledges that implementation is uneven and that the challenge remains in a context shaped by insecurity, displacement, humanitarian pressure, and climate shocks. In technical terms, Somalia's priority going forward is to consolidate gains and strengthen the implementation capacity. This includes operationalization of the National Independent Human Rights Commission, strengthening the Ministry of Family and Human Rights and other agents, and its counterpart as the national policy lead for human rights coordination and finalizing the NMRF's digitalization and as a permanent recommendation tracking and reporting platform. Somalia therefore welcomes focused recommendations that support implementation, sequencing, and institutional sustainability. I thank you. I now invite Mr. Mohammed Dirshe, a senior human rights advisor from the Ministry of Family and Human Rights, to address the cross-cutting issues related to the treaty engagement, legal and institutional reform, and implementation follow-up. Over to you.
Thank you. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, allow me to address the cross-cutting dimensions of Somalia's implementation record, particularly treaty engagement, legal and institutional reform, and national follow-up architecture. Somalia has continued to strengthen its engagement within the international and regional human rights system. During the reporting period, the government submitted initial reports under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention Against Torture, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Somalia also submitted its initial report under the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and completed preparations for its initial report under the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. At the regional level, the House of the People adopted the ratification bill for the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child in October 2025 and has been deposited with the African Union. While the ratification process for CEDAW and the Maputo Protocol progressed between 2024 and 2025 and still remain prioritized in 2026. Somalia also made substantial progress in its constitutional, legislative, and institutional reform. The recently adopted and amended another provisional federal constitution reaffirms the Bill of Rights. During the same period, Somalia advanced criminal law reform through cabinet approval of the Penal Code Amendment Bill and submission of its Criminal Procedure Code Amendment Bill, enacted the National Disability Law, adopted the National Elections Package, including the 30% women's quota, and approved additional governance and accountability legislation. These reforms reflect a deliberate effort to align national law and institutions more closely with the constitutional and international human rights obligations. A further major institutional milestone was the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission in 2025, in accordance with the law number 16, 27 June 2016. In parallel, national coordination on reporting and follow-up was strengthened through cabinet approval of the National Mechanism for Reporting and Follow-up Policy in 2024, establishing an interministerial task force chaired by the Ministry of Family and Human Rights Development. This has helped Somalia move from fragmented reporting towards a more integrated system linking the UPR, follow-up, treaty body engagement, special procedures, and broader implementation monitoring. At the same time, Somalia recognizes that implementation remains a phased process. Some reforms have been enacted, others are pending finalization, and others require operationalization and capacity support. Our approach is therefore to be precise, to distinguish between what has already been completed and what is underway, and what still requires additional and national effort as well as international partnership. I thank you. I now invite Mr. Kamal Mohammed, Senior Criminal Justice Advisor at the Office of the Attorney General, to address issues related to justice, due process, detention, the rule of law, and civic space.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Somalia recognizes that justice sector reform remains central to the promotion and protection of human rights, particularly in relation to detention, fair trial, accountability, and civic space. During the reporting period, Somalia launched its first national justice sector strategy and continue to strengthen justice and corrections reform through joint programs with national and international partners. Legal aid and alternative dispute resolution systems expanded, detention infrastructure was upgraded, and training for police, custodial officers, prosecutors, and other justice actors continued on human rights, sexual and gender-based violence, child protection, and reintegration. These efforts are intended to improve both access to justice and institutional compliance with human rights standards. Somalia has also continued efforts to strengthen accountability and the rule of law. Investigations and prosecutions have been undertaken in cases involving unlawful killing, including cases involving security personnel, and the government continues to work with partners and improve data collection, reporting, and accountability concerning civilian harm and conflict-related casualties. Simultaneously, Somalia openly acknowledges the significant challenges that persist. The OHCR compilation documents ongoing concerns from treaty bodies regarding issues such as torture, detention conditions, legal safeguards, military jurisdiction over civilians, and necessity for independent oversight of detention facilities. Stakeholder submissions further highlight issues related to overcrowding, insufficient food, water, and medical care, lack of detainee segregation, as well as ongoing allegations of arbitrary detention and restricted access to legal counsel. Somalia does not dismiss these concerns. These issues precisely underpin the continued prioritization of detention oversight, the expansion of legal aid, and reform of criminal law. Regarding freedom of expression and civic space, Somalia reaffirms the right to freedom of opinion and expression, including access to information, are protected under the Provisional Constitution of the Federal Republic of Somalia. The government has reviewed the 2024 report of the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and the United Nations Assistance Mission in Somalia concerning media freedom, and is carefully considering its recommendations to guide ongoing reforms relating to media regulation, criminal law, and the protection of journalists. Somalia acknowledges that practical and institutional challenges persist and remains committed to strengthening legal safeguards, improving accountability mechanisms, and fostering a safer environment for journalists and human rights defenders. In furtherance of this commitment, the Office of the Attorney General has adopted a victim-centered and accountability-based approach to addressing violations against journalists and restrictions on media freedom. The office has established direct channels of engagement with journalists, their families, and relevant stakeholders to facilitate access to information, support investigations, and improve coordination in responding to incidents affecting media personnel. A dedicated hotline has been established to enable journalists and members of the public to confidentially report violations, threats, and crimes committed against journalists. In parallel, the office continues to document past and ongoing abuses against journalists with a view to strengthening institutional awareness, supporting accountability processes, and informing future legal and policy reforms related to freedom of expression and media protection. As part of these efforts, the Attorney General's Office has appointed a Criminal Investigation Department officer to lead and coordinate investigations concerning crimes against journalists. The office has further engaged journalists' associations. In addition, the Special Prosecutor and the Senior Prosecutors received specialized training delivered in cooperation with UNESCO on freedom of information, freedom of expression, and international standards relating to media freedom and protection of journalists. Somalia has continued to strengthen its anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing (AML-CFT) framework through institutional consolidation and improved operational outputs. The Financial Reporting Center, Somalia's financial intelligence unit, has expanded its analytical and coordination functions and has reported include increased receipt, analysis, and dissemination of suspicious transaction information in its FRC Annual Report 2023 and FRC Annual Report 2024. Significant steps have been taken in disrupting terrorist financing. In parallel, Somalia has continued engagement with the AFTF global network and mutual evaluation processes, including publication of Somalia's profile on the FATF website and ongoing follow-up to address remaining technical compliance gaps. Somalia has made measurable progress in strengthening its anti-corruption framework through both international review and domestic strategy development. Somalia has actively engaged with the implementation review mechanism of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, including completion of the first cycle review and publication of the first cycle documentation through the UNCAC process, and Somalia is now progressing its second cycle review through the UNODC UNCAC country profile system. The review process has helped identify and prioritize key gaps which the government is addressing as a governance and rule of law priority. In addition, Somalia has continued to update and validate the national anti-corruption strategy, including recent high-level validation and approval processes that have been publicly reported as part of the country's broader governance reform agenda. I thank you. I now invite Anab Noor, Senior Legal Advisor at the Ministry of Family and Human Rights Development, to address women's rights, political participation, and gender-based violence.
Mr. Vice President, Excellency, my focus is on women's rights, particularly participation, protection, and the broader effort to shift from policy commitments to real outcomes. I want to start with a simple point. In Somalia, we increasingly recognize that women's rights are not a standalone issue. They are tied to how we build governance, sustain peace, and strengthen long-term stability. Over the past few years, we've made deliberate efforts to strengthen the legal and policy frameworks in this area. One of the most important steps taken has been the adoption of the 2024 electoral law package, which formally establishes a minimum 30% quota for women's representation across political and governance structures. This matters. But I also want to be honest with you about where we are. A quota on paper does not automatically translate into representation in practice, and we've seen that. So the real focus is on implementation, how that quota is enforced, how political processes actually accommodate it, and how we ensure that changes to the electoral system don't unintentionally push women out of spaces therefore hard to enter. Alongside that, we continue to invest in women's leadership more broadly through parliamentary caucuses and through the ongoing implementation of our women and peace and security commitments. On protection, particularly gender-based violence and conflict-related sexual violence, the picture is more difficult. There has been some progress. Survivor-centered services have expanded, such as one-stop centers, safe spaces, and mobile services. So access is in fact improving, even if unevenly. But we are not going to pretend that the problem is solved. It's not. Violence against women and girls remain widespread, and the gap between policy and lived reality is still significant. That's why legislative reform remains a priority. The Rape and Indecency Offences Bill, as well as a broader effort to strengthen legal frameworks on sexual violence, are part of that process. I'll be frank, this has taken much longer than we would have liked. But the intention is not just to pass the legislation quickly, it's to ensure that what is passed is actually workable, something that can be implemented across different contexts, and that genuinely improves access to justice for survivors. On harmful practices, particularly female genital mutilation and cutting, this is one of the most complex issues that we face. The government approved the National Anti-FGM Bill in 2025, which is an important step. But we are also clear that legislation alone will not change this. Progress here depends very much on the community engagement, on dialogue with religious leaders, and on shifting deeply rooted social norms. And that takes time. It requires consistency. On child and early marriages, our direction is also clear. The aim is to ensure that 18 is the minimum age of marriage, in line with our international obligations. We recognize that our legal framework is not yet fully harmonized on this point. that it is part of a broader constitutional and legislative reform process that is still ongoing. So again, this is an area where policy direction is established, but the work of alignment and implementation is still in progress. Across all of these issues, there is a common thread. Somalia today is not short of policies, strategies, or draft laws. The real challenge is in implementation, and doing that in a context that is still very much shaped by insecurity, displacement, climate shocks, and very real capacity constraint. That's not something that we're using to deflect responsibility, but it does explain why progress is sometimes uneven. Our focus now is on strengthening systems, making sure justice institutions can actually respond to the cases of gender-based violence, expanding access to services in a way that reaches beyond major urban centers, ensuring that political reforms translate into meaningful participation for women, and continuing to align our legal framework with international standards. And importantly, moving from commitments to outcomes that people can actually see and feel. Mr. Vice President, let me end on this. Somalia does not claim that the situation for women and girls has been fully transformed. It has not. But there is a clear direction of travel. We are building the legal and institutional foundations. We are starting to see changes in participation, and we are increasingly focused on the harder part, making sure that those changes are real, consistent, and sustainable. We remain committed to continuing this work and to engaging constructively with all partners in support of it. Thank you.
Muy bien, si la delegación.
Very well. For any additional information that you provided us, we're grateful for. So now we continue with our list of speakers, and I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Norway.
Vice President, Norway welcomes Somalia's establishment of the National Human Rights Commission and underscores the importance of ensuring its independence and adequate resources. We remain concerned about the overall human rights situation, including ongoing insecurity and limited access to justice. Norway recommends that Somalia, 1, establish a moratorium on the use of death penalty with a view to its abolition. 2, ensure harmonization of the legal definition of a child as any person below 18 years of age, in line with international standards. 3, accelerate ratification of CEDAW and finalize national legislation that prevent and combat GBV and SGBV, including female genital mutilation and child and forced marriage. 4, ensure women's equal participation in political and public life, including through effective implementation of the 30% quota in political elections. 5, protect human rights defenders, journalists, and media, and ensure that criminal and media laws are not used to criminalize freedom of expression and dissent. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished delegation of Oman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We welcome the delegation of the Federal Republic of Somalia, and we praise the efforts made in the preparation of the national report in accordance with the comprehensive participatory methodology and its interaction with the UPR. We have viewed the national report of Somalia, and we appreciate its launching of a social protection package, which is an integrated developmental approach to enhance social protection and access to basic services in the service in particular of the most vulnerable groups. And we recommend to pursue the enhancement of training and awareness raising programs in the field of human rights, especially for security institutions, to enhance the protection of human rights and to intensify efforts to implement national education policies to secure access to free primary education, especially for rural residents and vulnerable groups. In conclusion, we wish Somalia all success in this review. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Pakistan welcomes the delegation of Somalia and thanks it for the presentation of its country's report. We commend Somalia's engagement with the UPR process. In particular, we appreciate the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission and the adoption of key constitutional legislative reforms to strengthen governance for the protection of human rights. However, in a constructive spirit, we recommend that Somalia may, 1, Implement a comprehensive constitution ensuring equal protection of all citizens. 2. Establish independent mechanisms to investigate complaints of abuse and torture. 3. And take formidable steps to promote affordable and inclusive education for all children. We wish Somalia every success in its continued efforts. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Panama. Thank you very much, Vice President. Panama would like to welcome the delegation of Somalia and thank the delegation for presenting the national report. We recognize the commitment and sustained efforts in implementing the accepted recommendations, and in a constructive spirit would like to recommend the following. First, strengthen the implementation of the prohibition of harmful practices provided for in the Provisional Constitution, prioritizing specific actions for the eradication of FGM through the development of specific criminal legislation and community awareness programs. 2. Harmonize the national legal framework with the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, ensuring the effective implementation of 18 years as the minimum age for marriage. Panama encourages Somalia to continue to cooperate with international human rights mechanisms and wishes full success during this cycle. Thank you. Thank you very much. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Peru. Thank you very much, Vice President. Peru would like to thank the distinguished delegation of Somalia for the presentation of its report. We recognize especially the efforts aimed at establishing the National Human Rights Commission. In a constructive spirit, we recommend the following: adopted comprehensive legislation to combat discrimination, guarantees the effective inclusion of persons with disabilities, and eliminate structural barriers that limit access and conditions of equality to basic services like education and health. 2. Strengthen education policies in order to eliminate stigmatization, discrimination, and the lack of trained teachers and economic barriers that affect disproportionately children with disabilities. 3. Move forward in the prevention and reduction of statelessness through the ratification of relevant international conventions, as well as strengthening the legal framework to guarantee the right to nationality, especially for children in situation of vulnerability. We wish Somalia full success. Thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. The Philippines warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of Somalia. We commend Somalia for the progress made in strengthening national human rights frameworks during the review period despite significant challenges posed by prolonged conflict and climate shocks. We welcome the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission and the delisting of its law enforcement and security forces from the Secretary General's report on children and armed conflict. This is a clear recognition of the government's committed efforts to protect children from violence and abuse, including the recruitment and their use in armed conflict. The Philippines recommends the following: enhance measures to prevent and combat sexual and gender-based violence, including female genital mutilation, particularly in conflict-affected and displacement settings, ensuring survivor-centered services and accountability. 2. Consider acceding to CEDAW. And 3. Continue convening the National Human Rights Summit to sustain constructive engagement between the government, civil society, media, and international partners in rights-based governance. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Portugal.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Portugal thanks the delegation of Somalia for the presentation of its national report. We commend Somalia's continued efforts to enhance the human rights situation in the country, including through the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission in December 2025 as an important step towards strengthening the national human rights framework. We also welcome the adoption of the Protection of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Law in 2024, which reinforces the legal framework for equality, non-discrimination, accessibility, and the social inclusion of persons with disabilities. Portugal respectfully recommends that Somalia consider ratifying the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the involvement of children in armed conflict. Portugal wishes Somalia a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias, señora Pal.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Republic of Korea welcomes the delegation of Somalia and appreciates its effort to strengthen legal and institutional frameworks for the protection and promotion of human rights. In particular, we welcome the establishment of the National Independent Human Rights Commission in 2025. In the spirit of constructive engagement, we would like to make the following recommendations. 1. Strengthen measures to protect freedom of expression and ensure a safe and enabling environment for journalists and human rights defenders. 2. Step up efforts to prevent and respond
for Children 2024-2029. In a spirit of constructive dialogue, Rwanda recommends Somalia the following. 1. Strengthen access to quality education by investing in school infrastructure and teacher training, particularly in rural areas, and reducing financial barriers to ensure equal access to primary and secondary education for all children. Redouble efforts to improving access to water, sanitation, hygiene, nutrition, and vaccination services to reduce disease outbreak and maternal and infant mortality. Rwanda wishes Somalia a successful review. I thank you, Chair.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We welcome the head of this delegation of Somalia, and we thank them for the comprehensive national report that reflects their commitment to human rights. We appreciate the efforts made by Somalia and the achievements in the institutional and legislative framework in spite of challenges. Our recommendations accelerate the operationalization of the National Commission for Human Rights and to enhance the capacities of the Ministry of Human Rights to continue efforts to enhancing the rights of women and to translate legal achievements into effective participation, in addition to expanding basic services and addressing the challenges of displacement. We wish Somalia all success.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the delegation of Senegal. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President of Senegal. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the distinguished delegation of the Federal Republic of Somalia and thank the delegation for the presentation of the national report. We take note of the progress achieved in the protection of human rights, especially in the area of constitutional reform, strengthening the legislative framework, and establishment of a National Independent Human Rights Commission. We also praise the sectoral efforts aimed at promoting education for all, the participation of women in political life, as well as access to basic social services. As part of this constructive dialogue, Senegal would like to make the following recommendations. Continue the strengthening of the National Human Rights Commission in order to guarantee its independence, accessibility, and to ensure that it works in line with the Paris principles. To step up policies ensuring equal access to education, social protection, especially for women, children, and displaced populations. In conclusion, Senegal wishes Somalia full success in implementation of accepted recommendations. Thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Sierra Leone warmly welcomes and thanks the delegation of Somalia for its national report. We commend Somalia for enshrining the right to free and compulsory primary education in law and policy, and for guaranteeing every child free education through the secondary level, as reflected in the federal constitution and the 2020 National Education Policy. We also acknowledge Somalia's efforts to advance socioeconomic reforms, including reaching the HIPC initiative completion point and expanding social safety nets. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, we offer the following recommendations. 1. Consider amending the national legislation to guarantee at least 1 year of free pre-primary education and 12 years of free primary and secondary education. 2. Strengthen the implementation of legal guarantees for free and compulsory education. And 3. Continue taking measures to prevent, detect, eradicate the recruitment and use of child soldiers and ensure the prompt disarmament, demobilization, rehabilitation, and reintegration of child soldiers. Sierra Leone wishes Somalia a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Singapore.
Mr. Vice President, Singapore welcomes the delegation of the Federal Republic of Somalia and thanks it for its constructive engagement with the UPR process. We welcome Somalia's commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights and note the efforts made to enhance the protection of the rights of vulnerable persons, including women, children, and persons with disabilities, as well as to strengthen its health system. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, Singapore recommends the following. First, enhance poverty eradication efforts, including through measures to expand access to food, safe drinking water, and adequate sanitation in rural areas. Second, strengthen efforts to improve access to healthcare services. And third, further enhance efforts to expand women's economic empowerment and combat gender-based violence. I thank you.
Gracias, Senator.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Slovenia.
Mr. Vice President, Slovenia commends the delegation of Somalia for its commitment to the UPR process. While we see a positive step in the SG report of June 2025 regarding recruitment and the use of children that the Somali army and Somali police have been delisted, we also noted a concern expressed by the Human Rights Committee about reports that children were exposed to violence, abductions, labor and forced recruitment as child soldiers, and that girls in particular were subjected to exploitation and deprived of schooling. We recommend to Somalia to step up its efforts to ratify the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the involvement of children in armed conflict. According to reports, freedom of expression, opinion, and association in Somalia remains under restriction. Journalists, human rights defenders, and civil society activists face harassment, intimidation, and reprisals. We recommend to amend the media law from 2021 and to ensure full compliance with international human rights standards. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. South Africa welcomes the distinguished delegation of Somalia to this UPR session. My delegation commends Somalia for submitting initial state party reports under the Convention on the CRC, Convention on Torture, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. South Africa wishes to respectfully recommend that Somalia consider the following: ratify the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel and inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. Prioritize and expedite the creation of a Judiciary Commission, a National Human Rights Commission, and an Anti-Corruption Commission as a basis on which to build confidence in rule of law mechanisms. Thirdly, discontinue public executions and establish a moratorium on the death penalty with a view to its abolition, and to take appropriate steps to commute all death sentences to prison sentences. Lastly, ensure that its legislation prohibits all types of contemporary forms of slavery, including trafficking in persons and forced child marriage. South Africa wishes Somalia a successful review.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Sudan.
Mr. Vice President, South Sudan warmly welcome the distinguished delegation of friendly country Somalia, headed by Her Excellency Khadija Al-Makhzoumi, Minister of Family and Human Rights Development. We commend Somalia for its steadfast commitment to continue advancing the implementation of its international human rights obligations despite challenges, and for undertaking extensive legal and institutional reforms to strengthen constitutional governance, accountability, and electoral frameworks. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, South Sudan recommend: 1. Consider ratifying the optional protocol to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. 2. Take active measures to promote the participation of women and other marginalized groups in all spheres of life, including the political and economic spheres. 3. Guarantee free and inclusive primary education for all children, with targeted measures to increase enrollment of girls, children with disabilities, and internally displaced persons. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Gracias.
Thank you. The distinguished advisor of Spain has the floor. Thank you, Mr. President. Spain would like to welcome the delegation of Somalia. We welcome the creation of the National Independent Human Rights Commission, as well as the constitutional recognition of 18 as adulthood. We appreciate the efforts made by the delegation in making progress towards the protection of the rights of girls and boys and women. Spain recommends, first, adopting a comprehensive law against gender violence, to take all necessary measures to effectively combat the high prevalence of female genital mutilation and child marriage, and to ratify without reservations the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. 2. To set up a legal moratorium with a view to a later complete abolition of the death penalty. and to adopt the necessary measures to ensure that capital punishment is not used on minors. Third, to guarantee an enabling safe environment to ensure that human rights defenders and journalists can freely carry out their professional responsibilities without fear of reprisals, and to effectively impartially investigate cases of murders and enforce disappearances. And four, review the criminal code to decriminalize consensual same-sex relations. Thank you. Thank you. The representative of Palestine is recognized.
شكرا السيد نائب الرئيس.
Thank you. We would like to welcome the delegation of Somalia, and we thank them for the national report that reflects advances in the field of human rights in spite of challenges. We appreciate the creation of the National Commission for Human Rights and efforts to enhance the rights of women and children. In constructive spirit, we recommend the following: continue enhancing the capacities and independence of the National Commission for Human Rights to adopt law on children and juvenile justice in accordance with international standards, and to pursue efforts to stop the recruitment of children, and to continue efforts to increase the participation of women in public life. And we thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Sudan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We welcome the delegation of Somalia under the leadership of Her Excellency, the Minister. We commend the progress made in the field of human rights, including signing a treaty, as well as measures taken to protect children and reproductive health. We welcome the creation of a National Committee for Human Rights and adhering to the Palermo Agreement. We also welcome national reconciliation efforts. Recommendations: 1, continue efforts to establish a constitutional court and other institutions. 2, to continue efforts to protect the rights of persons with disabilities. We wish Somalia all success in this UPR. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Sweden has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Sweden acknowledges Somalia's ambition to improve the human rights situation through judicial reforms. However, we remain deeply concerned about the human rights situation and Somalia's compliance with international human rights conventions, both in legislation and in practice. Sweden would therefore like to make the following recommendations. 1, take all necessary measures to end violence against journalists. 2, review the new media law and other relevant legislation that impede the right to freedom of expression and media freedom in order to bring them in line with Somalia's international human rights obligations. 3, enact and implement legislation that prohibit all forms of violence against women and girls, including by ending, in law and in practice, all forms of female genital
Human Rights Commission in 2025. The successful and peaceful conduct of Banadr local council election in Mogadishu in December 2025 has proven the significance of recent legal and instrumental reforms. In a spirit of constructive dialogue, we recommend the following. First, finalizing the ongoing penal code reform. Second, further strengthen the protection of children by ratifying the optional protocol to the Convention on the Right to the Child on the involvement of children in armed conflict and other recommended instruments. Third, continue to promote the rights of women and girls as well as the person with disabilities. Turkey wishes Somalia a successful review. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Uganda has the floor.
President, we warmly welcome the distinguished delegation of the Federal Republic of Somalia. We commend the government of Somalia for their dedication and determination to promote and protect the rights amidst security, structural, and national challenges. In the spirit of constructive dialogue, we propose 3 recommendations. 1, continue to put in place measures and enforce implementation of elimination of early child marriages and protect girls from sexual and gender-based violence. 2, harmonize the legal framework and put in place policies to guarantee protection of girls and women from harmful practices of female genital mutilation. And 3, continue to take measures to ensure security and safety for all, including protection of children from recruitment into armed conflict. My delegation wishes our Somali brothers and sisters a very successful review. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene a continuación.
Thank you. Now I'd like to recognize the distinguished representative of Ukraine.
Mr. Vice President, Ukraine welcomes the delegation of Somalia and thanks it for the presentation of its national report. Recognizing the efforts made by the government of Somalia in the third UPR cycle, we nevertheless know the significant challenges remain. Ukraine calls on Somalia to fully implement the recommendations accepted during its previous UPR cycle. We encourage Somalia to continue its efforts in this regard and would like to recommend to investigate and combat the recruitment of foreign nationals, hold accountable all those involved in conducting, facilitating, or promoting such recruitment, to take the necessary measures to prevent and combat discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, to consider ratifying the second optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, aiming at the abolition of the death penalty, and to adopt the necessary legislative measures to that end, to strengthen efforts to fully incorporate the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, international legislation, and to combat discrimination against persons with disabilities in all areas of life. We wish the delegation of Somalia a successful review. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la
Thank you. The distinguished representative of the United Kingdom has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The UK commends Somalia for its engagement with the UN human rights system. We recognise the progress Somalia has made by establishing a national independent human rights commission. We remain deeply concerned about reported differentiation of the age of responsibility and the age of maturity. It is essential that the rights of children, individuals below the age of 18, are protected. We remain concerned at the ongoing loss of civilian life due to conflict and insecurity, continuing cases of sexual and gender-based violence, and restrictions on freedom of expression, including the detention of journalists. We recommend 1, prioritising protecting the rights of children, protecting the rights of all individuals under the age of 18. 2, ratifying the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and undertaking its swift implementation. And 3, ensuring freedom of speech and strong protections for journalists operating in Somalia. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of the Republic of Tanzania has the floor.
Mr. Vice President, the United Republic of Tanzania warmly welcomes the Federal Republic of Somalia to this 22nd Universal Periodic Review session. We commend Somalia's effort in establishing a national mechanism for reporting and follow-up to strengthen coordination in preparation of state party report, and encourage continued engagement to all relevant stakeholders in dissemination and implementation of UPR recommendations. We also congratulate Somalia for the establishment of National Independent Human Rights Commission and recommend continued support to enable it to effectively discharge its mandate in accordance with its founding law. We further commend Somalia's effort in conducting human rights training for security institutions, civil servants, and civil society organizations, and encourage expansions of such training to other categories of public officials. The United Republic of Tanzania wishes Somalia
free elementary education, especially for displaced children. We wish you a successful UPR. Thank you, Vice President.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, the distinguished representative of Vietnam is recognized.
Mr. Vice President, Vietnam warmly welcomes the delegation of Somalia. We commend Somalia's progress in promoting and protecting human rights, including in famine prevention, expansion of social protection, improvements in school enrollment, strengthened healthcare services, climate-resilient livelihoods, and poverty measurement. In a constructive spirit, Vietnam recommends that Somalia 1. Strengthen food security and nutrition with a focus on the most vulnerable populations, including internally displaced persons, children, and communities in drought and flood-affected areas. 2. Continue to improve the quality and accessibility of education, including by increasing the number of qualified teachers and ensuring equitable access for children in rural areas and displacement settings. 3. Continue efforts to reduce youth unemployment, including through vocational trainings, skills development, and support for livelihoods and employment in both formal and informal sectors. We wish Somalia every success in its UPR process. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Gracias.
Thank you. Now, we are going to have a video statement from Yemen. Sir, we would like to welcome the delegation of Somalia, the sisterly republic. We commend efforts made to promote and protect human rights, mainly in the area of education, in spite significant security and humanitarian challenges in the country. We appreciate the efforts that have been made to improve the stability, to increase the political participation, and to improve the standard of living of the most vulnerable. We would like to encourage Somalia to continue its efforts to strengthen institutional capacity building for the protection of human rights. Thank you. Thank you. Distinguished representation of Zambia.
Vice President, Zambia cordially welcomes the distinguished delegation of Somalia. We commend Somalia for its engagement with the UPR and acknowledge efforts made to promote and protect human rights under complex security and humanitarian challenges. Zambia recognizes that addressing these challenges requires sustained commitment and international support. In the spirit of constructive engagement, Zambia recommends the following to Somalia. 1. Strengthening measures to prevent and respond to gender-based violence, including conflict-related sexual violence, and intensify efforts to eliminate child marriage through community-based interventions. 2. Enhance child protection systems, including measures to prevent the recruitment and use of children in armed conflict. 3. Strengthen efforts to expand access to inclusive and quality education, particularly for girls and internally displaced children. Zambia encourages Somalia to continue its efforts to progressively realize human rights for all. We wish Somalia a successful review. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you, the distinguished representative of Zimbabwe.
Vice President, Zimbabwe welcomes the delegation of the Republic of Somalia. We commend Somalia for undertaking extensive legal and institutional reforms to strengthen governance, accountability, and electoral reforms during the period under review. In the spirit of dialogue, Zimbabwe recommends the following. Number one, prioritize the implementation of its counter-terrorism framework and to address the violations against women and girls. Two, to fully implement its social protection system framework so as to improve access to health, education, and nutrition by disadvantaged groups, including women and girls. And three, to strengthen and enhance its justice institutions, the justice framework and mechanisms, and ensure affordability, accessibility, and responsiveness to its services to ordinary citizens. We wish Somalia a successful review. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Now, we would break once again and give the floor to the delegation for observations and comments, addressing what has been raised by delegations so far. You have the floor.
you.